Hey everybody, welcome back to Art by Galen. I'm Galen Eilenfeld, and today I've got another tutorial for you. We're going to be covering drawing the torso. What I'm going to do is show you how to draw the torso based on the proportions of the head, and using the size of the head to create relations of other landmarks on the body. One of the first things that you want to do is measure the height of the head, and then give yourself a guide that is 4 heads high, so you can see like this here. And just to save time, I've gone ahead and created these guidelines. That'll give us one reference, and then another reference that we need to make is taking this distance here and dividing it into 6 sections as well as I've done here. And if you're doing this on paper, an easy way to do it is to draw yourself a line that's 6 inches high, make each of these sections 1 inch, and then each of these sections 1.5 inches. And it doesn't have to be inches. If you use metric, you can use centimeters or whatever other measurement that you'd like to use, as long as you've got it broken down into quarters and into sixths. I'm going to dim down the opacity on my guides here, but I want to leave them where we can see them. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves some reference lines, and I'm going to draw with a little bit lighter color. First of all, you want to give yourself a center line and just run it right through the bottom. And then give yourself 2 more lines based on the outside of the ears on the head, okay? And one thing I want you to keep in mind with this tutorial is that this is kind of an average. This is not how every single human being is going to look. All of our bodies are going to vary, in lots of different ways, and not just in male and female differences, but in individual differences. One way that it's going to vary is the width of the body itself. If it's a more narrow body frame, it can be roughly 2 head widths high. If we were to take the head and then make a copy of it like so, that would be the width of the body. You would see the shoulders matching that width. If it's a more broad-shouldered person, it might be as much as 3 head widths high. It just depends on the person. But for this tutorial, I'm going to stick with 2 head widths wide. A little quick disclaimer before we get started. This tutorial assumes that you already know how to draw the head, or at least get the essence of the head shape in here. And if you're not quite comfortable drawing the head, I do have other tutorials that I've done, and I'll put a link in a card up top here if you'd like to go check those out before continuing on here. Anyhow, we're going to progress on here. The first thing that I want you to note is right here. That's where the center line intersects with the second line right here. And what that is if we take this point and run a line up almost the width of the head, but not quite. This gives us that V shape in the neck. And this isn't the entirety of it, but this gives us the beginnings of it. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to note the center here. Like if we were to make a center point between here and here, so right here would be where I'm talking about. If we make a point here, I'll erase this out, and for sake of reference, I'm going to call this our middle line because we've got it broken into 4s and in 6s, and this is the center for both of those divisions. But on that center line, if we go down 1 more sixth and make marks here, and these lines, remember, are the width of the ears that we made earlier, and so from that, we're going to create kind of a swooping shape. It's going to be wider at the bottom, and then it's going to arc towards that point and then loop right back down. Almost like a teardrop shape. And what this is this gives us the rough outer edge of the rib cage. And then if we come approximately 1/3 down from this center point, that can give us the high mark on where the ribs come together in the front, just below the sternum. And so the sternum would sit right in here. It's also worth noting that the clavicle and the collarbone will also sit on this same line where we made this mark earlier. It dips down just underneath it, and then the collarbone comes up and out of that. And keep in mind the collarbone has a kind of a strange shape. It goes up at an angle and then across, and then it goes back again. But we're not going to get too deep into the anatomy side of it. We're going to be studying primarily proportions today. And so the top of the shoulders would be sitting right about here. if we go to our center line, this is also the line where the nipples will generally follow. And a good starting point is where that center line intersects with this width line that we gave ourselves earlier. So we can just put some marks here. That's roughly where the nipples will be. I'm going to go ahead and give myself some reference measurements just to make these a little bit more visible, just so you guys can see a little more clearly which lines I'm pointing at without getting lost in them, because I'm getting lost in them. So anyhow, on this line here, where that intersects with the center, that's roughly where the navel will fall on the abdomen. And then on the bottom line, this isn't actually the a lot of people put like the lowest point of the pubic crest, like where it kind of arcs downward, and so the legs would be starting here, but actually the pubic crest falls a little bit below that, and so I just make kind of a smooth V shape. If we extend these lines down, and this is that double head width that we marked out earlier, if we extend those lines down and then start from here on this line and bring just a straight line down to where that line intersects with the bottom line. Obviously it won't be a straight line like this, it will have more of a curve to it. The next landmark that we're going to put is the iliac crest, and what that is it's the little protrusion in this area where the hip bone sort of juts forward on our waist. One thing worth noting on the iliac crest is on men it's going to sit higher than it will on women. Also, men will not have this kind of skirt shape most of the time. On women it's going to sit a little bit lower. One quick thing, if we consider the shape of the hip bone, which is kind of a butterfly shape, and I'm generalizing, it's definitely not like an actual butterfly, but it has that sort of shape to it. If we consider that, and then this is the iliac crest that we had drawn in, the way the leg connects to it is a little piece that protrudes out of the leg, that protrudes out of the femur bone, and then it comes out into a part called the great trochanter, which is right here, and that goes down into the leg. And this is actually the rotational point. But another thing worth noting is that that is the widest point of the hips. So from here, what we're going to do is create a rough shape for the thighs. And I'll give myself a curved line coming up, going out to this, double head width line, and then curving up into that first point that we made right here. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. And then depending on the person, when you show the inner side of the legs, sometimes there's a gap between them, sometimes there isn't. It just depends on the person's anatomy. Now I'm going to switch colors just to show one extra thing here. If we look at the area where the iliac crest is and the great trochanter, those are points that are important landmarks when you're drawing the hips. Now, if you take kind of an arc like this and draw that where it kind of pushes in on that section in between them, like it touches the bone, it goes in, and then it touches the bone. Okay? Now, I'm highly exaggerating this, but this is just to demonstrate. If we give ourselves these lines, that gives us a more accurate shape of a woman's hips, because it's going to be wider down here towards the legs. It's going to go in just above the great trochanter, and once we get closer to the hips, it's going to kind of widen out again, and then goes in towards the waist. Okay, so I'm going to go back in and draw these in my normal color that I'm using here, just to get rid of the blue. And then as this comes up, it doesn't necessarily go all the way into this line. And again, it's going to vary a lot depending on the person or the body type that you're drawing. Another thing to consider, and it's another thing I've seen with when people draw someone bending over, our natural bend is going to happen right here. It's going to happen almost right across where the navel is. You can bend at the hips, but most people don't. So most of the time, this is that point of action where that's going to happen. Just a little side note. And we're not going to get too much into the arm anatomy, but this is where the upper part of the shoulder would be, and then that would come down into the biceps and triceps. You're going to have this area where the pec muscle kind of tucks in over by the arm. It doesn't just tuck into like a little point. It kind of rounds itself over. Another measurement is that right at the navel line, this is also about the bottom of where the elbow will fall. So it would be about here. Whether the arm is straight or if it's bent, the elbow generally will not go below that line. We can quickly sketch that in on the other side. And I personally find it useful, regardless of the body type that I'm drawing, I find it useful to start with a smaller scale like this, and then add on, flesh and muscle as I need to. The only changes that you would need to make in the very beginning is the width of the body. So if you're drawing someone that's very exaggerated and very muscular, you would want to do, something wider than 2 heads. And then we've got these muscles, and I can't recall the name, so forgive me, that come up on our backs and our shoulders up into the neck. And I do plan on doing more detailed anatomy tutorials in the future, but this is just kind of a place to get us started. We've drawn the women's hips, so we may as well continue with the woman's body. And the breasts are a whole other tutorial on their own. Honestly, they're in my opinion, they're one of the more difficult things to draw, or more challenging at least, to make them look natural or however. So we're not going to go too much into detail about how to draw this, but I'm just doing this to finish out the drawing. So now that I've roughed in these details, I'm going to lighten this layer up, and we're going to come on top of that with a new layer and draw some sharper details so you can see the shapes. Okay, so now that we've added details, we can see how using all these measurements, and they're all based on, the height of the head. Everything is relative to that. You can create a pretty accurate torso drawing based on just that, even without a reference. I know I haven't drawn the arms or the wrist completely, but typically the forearm will come down and the wrist will stop roughly around where this bottom line is. And then the hands will continue beyond that. A few other minor notes is to keep in mind that all of these things are going to change depending on the person that you're drawing. They may change very subtly, they may change in a big way. On a body this size, that iliac crest is going to show. Whenever you're doing your shading and your lighting and stuff, this part is going to protrude out. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind that this is your bend point. And keep in mind that on women, this little sort of shelf that is below the navel tends to protrude outward a little bit more. So this will actually catch more light and cast a little bit more of a shadow underneath it. Whether or not they're muscular or not, it will have that sort of like if you're looking at it from the side, it would be, the abs would come down, and then there's this little sort of shape that pokes out where the belly button is, and then it comes back down. But anyhow, thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions or any suggestions, please feel free to leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear what you think about it. I know I'm not a master at this, so I know that it's not like a perfect way of doing it. I'm heavily influenced by the methods that Patrick Jones uses for drawing the body. And if you don't know him, look him up. He does some amazing realistic fantasy work. I found this method particularly helpful when I'm mapping out the body. And I wanted to share that with you. If you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you're not already a subscriber and you want to see more, be sure to hit that subscribe button as well. Remember, I do art videos every Friday. On Saturdays, I publish a new video for my Ask an Artist series, which will continue on for another month or two. Also want to let you guys know, if you don't know already, that I do stream live on Twitch Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Time. I do lots of different types of artwork on there. I'm happy to answer questions, and even if you just want to hang out and have a good time, all of you are welcome. But anyhow, I hope you have a great day, and until next time, take care.